The twin moons of Virell hung low in the orange sky, their light spilling across the temple plateau like liquid gold. The air shimmered with heat and dust. In the center of that sacred place stood the Stone of Trials, an enormous block of black crystal older than the city itself. And embedded deep in its heart was the Spear of Unity, a weapon of light and legend that no living being had ever pulled free. The people of Virell gathered around it every decade, hoping a new champion would rise. The ritual had become less about belief and more about despair. Generations had tried and failed. Every warrior, every priest, every hopeful child who had touched the spear had walked away broken. Tonight, their last hope was Princess Liora, daughter of the fallen king. Her silver armor shone under the temple torches, her face calm but her hands trembling slightly. The council had begged her not to try again. The last attempt had nearly cost her life. But she couldn't stand aside any longer, not while her world was dying. The priest's voice echoed through the temple. "By the will of the ancestors, the trial begins." Liora stepped forward. The crowd went silent. Her reflection shimmered on the black surface of the stone. She could see fear in her own eyes, but she didn't turn away. With both hands, she reached for the spear. Her fingers touched the cold metal. A pulse of blue light ran through it, humming faintly. She gritted her teeth and pulled, once, twice, 3 times. The spear did not move. It was as if the stone itself was alive, holding the weapon prisoner. She dropped to her knees, her breath shaking. Around her, the murmurs began. She failed, just like the others. But before the priest could end the ceremony, a flash of light split the sky. The temple guards rushed outside, weapons drawn. Through the dust and thunder, a small craft spiraled down, crashing into the dunes beyond the walls. An outsider had fallen from the heavens. When the storm cleared, the soldiers dragged the stranger through the temple gates. A tall man in torn armor, his skin pale, his features unlike theirs. His clothes were strange, his eyes filled with confusion and exhaustion. The crowd hissed and backed away. "A human," one of them whispered. "A creature from the forbidden worlds." He was bleeding, limping, but still stood proud. He looked around the circular hall at the glowing stone and the fearful faces. "Where am I?" he asked. His voice was deep, steady. No one answered. Liora stepped forward, studying him with cautious curiosity. She had read about humans in old archives. Rare wanderers, reckless and strange, capable of great cruelty and great kindness. But she had never seen one in flesh and blood. "You are on Virell," she said carefully. "A sacred world. Outsiders are forbidden here." "I didn't plan to come," the man said, brushing sand from his face. "My ship, it crashed during the storm. I was just trying to survive." His honesty surprised her. His tone wasn't proud or afraid, just tired. Before she could speak again, one of the priests shouted, "Keep him away from the sacred stone." But the man's eyes had already fallen upon it, the black crystal, the spear glowing faintly in its heart. It drew him in like a magnet. He walked closer, ignoring the spears pointed at his chest. Liora moved to block his path. "Don't touch it," she warned. "That weapon chooses no one. It kills those who try." He paused, glancing at her. "Kills? It's just a piece of metal stuck in a rock." "It's a symbol," she said softly. "It's the last hope of our world." Something in her voice made him hesitate. The way she said hope, it carried pain, not faith. "What happens if someone does pull it out?" he asked. The old priest spoke from behind her, his voice trembling. "Then the prophecy will be fulfilled. The one who frees the Spear of Unity will heal the land and unite the tribes. But that cannot happen. No living Virellian has the strength. The gods have turned from us." The man chuckled lightly. "Maybe you've been trying too hard." The guards growled, raising their weapons, but Liora raised her hand to stop them. Something strange was happening. The stone, silent for centuries, began to hum again, louder this time. The light inside it flickered, reacting to the human's presence. Everyone froze. The old priest's eyes widened. "No, it cannot be." The man took one slow step forward, unaware of what was happening. The glow intensified, filling the chamber with blinding blue light. The air buzzed like thunder trapped in glass. Liora's heart pounded. The stories said the spear would awaken only for the one not born of their stars. Could this outsider truly be the one? "Stop," she cried, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of energy. The man reached the stone. He hesitated, then placed his hand on the spear's handle. For a heartbeat, the world went still. Then, A low rumble shook the temple walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. The spear moved. Just a little, a fraction of an inch, but enough to make everyone gasp. The light burst outward like a wave. The guards fell to their knees. The priests screamed prayers. Liora stared speechless as cracks began to form across the stone. The man stepped back, startled. "What the hell just happened?" the old priest whispered, voice shaking with fear and awe. "The prophecy, it's real." Liora turned to the human. His face was lit by the blue glow, his eyes wide, his breath heavy. He didn't look like a conqueror. He looked lost, and yet, the stone had chosen him. She whispered the words only she could hear over the rumbling echoes of the sacred temple. Only a human could pull it free. The temple was silent after the light faded. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars. The great stone of trial stood cracked but unbroken, the spear still shining faintly inside it. And there, among the stunned alien priests and soldiers, stood the human, breathing hard, staring at his trembling hands. No one spoke. They were too afraid. The air smelled of lightning. The stone had not reacted like this for centuries. The priests whispered old prayers. Leora's heart beat fast. The old prophecies, could they truly be real? Before anyone could move, the captain of the guards barked, "Seize him!" 2 soldiers grabbed the human by the arms. He didn't resist, he was still in shock. His name, they learned later, was Mason Hale, a scout from a distant colony. He didn't know what he had done. He just felt something calling him from that spear, as if it recognized him. They dragged him into the council chamber, a circular room filled with glowing symbols. Liora followed quietly. The elders gathered in a ring, their robes brushing the floor like waves. He defiled the sacred relic. One elder cried, "No outsider should touch the weapon of unity." Liora stepped forward. "He didn't defile it," she said softly. The spear moved for him. "You all saw it." "That's impossible," another elder hissed. "Only one not born of Virell." He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. Liora finished his words. "Only one not born of our stars can free it. That is what the prophecy says." The room fell into a heavy silence. Mason finally spoke. "Look, I didn't mean to start a holy war or whatever this is. My ship crashed. I was trying to find shelter, that's all, but no one believed him." The guards pushed him to his knees. Liora watched as the high priest raised his staff. "He is a danger to our faith. The spear's awakening could destroy us all." Mason frowned. "Destroy you? I barely touched it." The priest struck the ground with his staff. Blue energy flared around him. "You will be imprisoned until we decide your fate." Hours later, in the dim light of the temple prison, Mason sat alone behind an energy field. The walls were made of stone and humming crystals. He had been through battles, wars, and loss, but never anything like this. His head throbbed with strange echoes like whispers he couldn't understand. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of light, stars twisting in the sky, and that same spear shining in his hands. A soft sound broke the silence. Someone had entered. It was Liora. She wore a hooded cloak, her silver armor hidden beneath. She deactivated the cell barrier with a small device and stepped closer. "You should not be here," Mason said quietly. "I could say the same to you," she replied. "You're lucky they didn't execute you on the spot." He gave a faint smirk. "I'm starting to realize that." She studied him for a long moment. "When you touched the spear, did you feel something?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, like it knew me. Like it wanted to move." Her eyes widened slightly. "That's exactly what the legends say." "Legends?" he repeated, she explained, her voice low and full of weight. "Our world has been dying for centuries. The tribes are divided, our skies poisoned by war. The spear of unity was left by the ancients, a promise that one day someone chosen would return peace. Every generation tries to fulfill it. Every generation fails." Mason sighed, leaning against the wall. "And you think I'm that person?" "I don't know what I think," she admitted. "But the stone reacted to you. It never reacted to anyone else." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not special. I'm just a man who crash-landed on the wrong planet." "Maybe," she said softly, "or maybe fate brought you here." Before either could say more, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Liora quickly raised the barrier again. The high priest appeared at the end of the hall, his eyes cold. "Princess," he said sharply, "you should not be among prisoners. She bowed slightly. "Forgive me, High One. I wish to see the outsider before his judgment." The priest's gaze turned to Mason. "Judgment has been made. At dawn, he faces the trial of worth. If he survives, he may speak. If he fails, his death will cleanse the temple." Mason's jaw tightened. "Trial of worth? Sounds fun." Leora's heart sank. The trial had killed many strong warriors. None had survived it. As the priest turned to leave, the temple lights flickered. The ground rumbled faintly again. Far above them, the spear of unity glowed brighter, like it was calling to someone. Liora looked back at Mason through the shimmering energy field. His eyes met hers, calm but determined. For the first time, she felt a strange, quiet certainty in her chest. The prophecy wasn't just a story anymore. The human was the beginning of something the stars themselves could not stop. The twin suns rose over the desert horizon, turning the sand into rivers of gold and fire. The temple of Virell stood silent, waiting for the dawn ritual. Inside its stone walls, Mason Hale sat chained at the center of an ancient arena. Around him, thousands of alien eyes watched from the terraces, their faces painted in ritual marks. They had come to witness the trial of worth, a test that no being had ever survived. High above, the priests chanted in the old tongue. The sound echoed like thunder. Mason lifted his head, his face bruised but calm. He had seen battlefields before, but this was different. Here he wasn't fighting for victory. He was fighting for his right to live. At the edge of the arena stood Princess Liora, her silver cloak drawn tight. Her heart raced. She didn't want to watch this, but the council demanded it. If Mason failed, they would call him a blasphemer. If he succeeded, the prophecy might awaken. The high priest raised his staff. By the judgment of the gods, the outsider will face the trial. Should he survive, he shall be declared worthy to walk among us. The crowd roared. Chains fell from Mason's wrists and the arena floor began to shift. Plates of metal and stone separated, revealing glowing blue runes beneath. From hidden gates around the circle, mechanical beasts emerged. Tall bronze creatures shaped like wolves, their eyes burning with fire. Leora's breath caught. "They're using the Guardians?" No one answered her. Mason looked around, jaw tightening. "Great, giant robot dogs. Just what I needed today." The first Guardian lunged. Mason dove to the side, barely avoiding its claws. The sand exploded around him. He rolled to his feet, grabbing a broken spear shaft from the ground. He swung it hard, striking sparks off the creature's neck. It howled but didn't fall. From the terrace, the crowd shouted, some in awe, others calling for his death. Liora gripped the railing, whispering a prayer. "Please survive." Mason fought with instinct and desperation. He dodged another strike, slid under the beast, and jammed the broken spear into a joint in its armor. Blue energy hissed out. The creature staggered, collapsing into the dust. For a moment, the arena fell silent. Then the second Guardian attacked. This one was faster, larger. It slammed him into the ground. Pain shot through his ribs. Mason grabbed a handful of sand and threw it into the creature's glowing eyes. It shrieked, blinded. He rolled away, snatched a fallen blade from the ground, and with a grunt of effort drove it through the beast's core. The explosion sent him flying backward. He hit the ground hard, coughing blood. Liora took a step forward. "He can't take another hit." The high priest turned to her coldly. "If he dies, then the gods have spoken." Mason forced himself up, shaking. The last Guardian rose from the smoke, larger than all the rest, crowned with silver horns. Its chest glowed with pure energy. He stood his ground. "All right, one more dance," the beast charged. Mason waited until the last moment, then leapt aside. Its claws missed his head by inches. He grabbed a broken energy rod from the ground, the kind used by the temple guards. The weapon hummed weakly. He pressed its glowing end against the creature's wound, forcing the energy deep inside. The Guardian screamed as its body convulsed. Mason ducked behind a pillar as the creature exploded in a burst of blue fire. Silence. The crowd stared in disbelief. The arena floor was covered in smoke and sand. In the center stood the human, bloody, shaking, but alive. The high priest's staff trembled in his hands. "Impossible." Liora smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "He did it." Mason dropped to one knee, gasping for air. The runes on the arena floor began to glow brighter, responding to his heartbeat. From deep within the temple, a familiar hum rose again, the same sound that came from the Spear of Unity. The crowd began to murmur. Some knelt. Others cried out in fear. Liora walked into the arena, ignoring the shouts of the guards. She knelt beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've passed the trial, you're worthy," he gave a weak smile. "Tell that to my ribs." But as their eyes met, both felt it, the pulse of the spear echoing in their chests. The prophecy was no longer a myth. It was waking. Above them, lightning flashed across the twin suns, and the temple trembled once more. The ancient weapon called out from the stone, glowing brighter than ever. The human had proven his worth, and the world of Virell would never be the same again. The twin suns of Virell sank low behind the red mountains, painting the sky in fire and violet haze. A soft wind carried dust and the distant sound of chanting from the temple. The trial was over, but the world had changed. The human, Mason Hale, had survived what no alien ever could. Now, he was being hunted for it. They escaped under the cover of night. Liora led the way through narrow stone paths that wound down from the temple cliffs. She had shed her royal armor, now wearing a traveler's cloak. Mason followed behind, his steps heavy and slow from exhaustion. "Where are we going?" he asked quietly. "Somewhere the priests cannot follow," she said. "The council has called you a blasphemy. They will never let you live after what happened." He chuckled weakly. "Figures. I pull off a miracle and they call it a crime." She didn't smile. "On Virell, miracles are dangerous. They moved through the darkness until the stone gave way to a sea of glowing sand. Beneath their feet, the dunes shimmered faintly blue, pulsing with strange energy. It was beautiful and deadly. Liora called it the Shattered Expanse, a wasteland left after the ancient wars. "No one comes here," she warned. "The air itself burns those who lie." Mason gave her a look. "Good thing I'm an honest man." She almost smiled, but the sound of distant wings broke the quiet. Dark shapes moved against the sky. "Temple hunters down," she hissed, pulling him behind a fallen pillar. The creatures flew overhead, metal wings slicing the air. Liora whispered a chant, pressing her hand against the sand. The ground shimmered, bending light around them. Mason blinked. "What did you just do?" "A cloaking prayer," she whispered. "Don't move." He didn't. The shadows passed, and the night fell silent again. Only then did Liora release her hand, her face pale from strain. "Thanks," Mason muttered. "Remind me not to annoy you." "You already did," she said softly. They kept walking until dawn touched the horizon. The world stretched before them, endless desert, broken ruins, and twisted towers swallowed by sand. Mason stopped for a moment, staring at the alien sky. "You really think this spear can fix everything?" he asked. Liora looked at the horizon. "It's not just a weapon. It's life. When it's freed, the tribes will stop fighting. The land will heal. At least, that's what I was taught." "And you believe that?" She hesitated. "I used to, but now I'm not sure if the gods chose you to save us, or to test us." They reached the remains of an old outpost at midday. The walls were half buried in sand, but the roof still stood. Inside, Mason found an old water unit that somehow still worked. He splashed his face and sighed. "Feels almost normal," he said. "Almost." Liora watched him quietly. He was different from her people, rough, direct, but also kind. He didn't treat her like a princess or a prophecy. He treated her like a person. It felt strange and comforting. "You risked everything for me," she said finally. "Why?" He looked up, his voice steady. "Because you risked everything for me first. Where I come from, we don't leave people behind." She studied his face for a long moment. "Humans are strange." "Yeah," he said. "We get that a lot." A soft laugh escaped her, the first real one since the trial. But peace never lasted long on Virell. That evening, as they shared a small fire, the ground trembled beneath them. From the dunes, a caravan of dark riders appeared, mercenaries wearing temple insignias. The hunters had found them. "Run," Liora whispered, grabbing her spear. Mason stood beside her, gripping a metal pipe he had turned into a makeshift weapon. The riders circled, engines howling. One of them shouted, "Surrender the human!" "The council demands his life." Mason's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I've heard that before." Liora glanced at him. "Can you fight?" He smirked. "I'm better at improvising," the first rider charged. Mason swung the pipe, knocking the attacker off his mount. Liora moved like lightning, her spear glowing with blue light as she cut through another rider's armor. The air filled with smoke and sand. The battle was short but fierce. When it ended, the riders lay scattered, their machines burning. Mason leaned on his weapon, breathing hard. Liora turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly from the spear's energy. "They'll keep coming," she said. "The prophecy has awakened the world. Every tribe will want the one who can move the spear." He wiped the blood from his cheek. "Then we better find it first," Liora nodded. "Beyond the expanse lies the cradle of stars, the birthplace of the spear. If the truth exists, it's there." Mason looked toward the horizon. The sky above it shimmered with strange lights, like a galaxy trapped within clouds. "Then that's where we're going," he said. As they walked into the glowing night, their shadows stretched across the dunes. One human, one alien, two souls bound by fate and prophecy. The wind whispered across the sand, carrying an ancient voice from the past. "When the stars fade and hope is lost, the stranger will rise, and the world will remember." The desert wind howled like a living thing as night fell across the shattered expanse. Two moons rose, pale and cold, casting silver light over the dunes. Mason Hale and Princess Liora moved through the wasteland, following the faint trail toward the ancient site she called the Cradle of Stars. But far behind them, someone else followed, someone who wanted the human dead before he could reach that place. In the burning ruins of the outpost they had left behind, a massive figure stood watching the sandstorms rise. His name was Warlord Kareth, commander of the Dominion armies. His armor was black steel with glowing red veins, his eyes sharp and cold. He had once served Liora's father, but after the old king's fall, Kareth became ruler of the southern tribes by force. The prophecy of the spear was a threat to his power, and now a human had awakened it. That could not be allowed. "Track them," Kareth growled to his soldiers. "The human lives only long enough to free the spear. Then I will take it from his corpse." The soldiers bowed and vanished into the night. Far away, Mason and Liora rested beside a low cliff. Their fire was small, hidden from sight. Mason sharpened a blade he'd made from scavenged metal, while Liora repaired her spear, the one she had carried since childhood. She looked at him across the flames. "You fight like someone who's seen too much war." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, back home we fought to survive too. Different worlds, same mistakes." Liora tilted her head. "And what did you fight for?" He stared into the fire. "People, my squad. Sometimes that's all that matters in keeping someone else alive." There was silence for a moment. The fire crackled softly. "You're not like the others I've known," she said finally. "Most humans in our records were destroyers." Mason gave a small laugh. "We're complicated. Some of us build. Some of us burn. Guess I'm still deciding which one I am." Before Liora could answer, a sharp tremor shook the ground. The air turned cold. She looked toward the horizon. A thin red glow shimmered in the distance. Her face went pale. "Kareth," Mason frowned. "Who's that?" "The warlord of the Dominion," she said, her voice tight. "He killed my father and took half the world in flames. If he's coming, he wants the spear's power." "Then he's coming for me," Mason muttered. She nodded grimly. "Yes, and he won't stop until he has what he wants." They broke camp and ran through the night, crossing black cliffs and glowing sands. But the sound of pursuit grew louder, engines' roars and the crash of metal against stone. Kareth's hunters were close. By dawn, Mason and Liora reached a canyon filled with strange floating stones that shimmered like glass. She called it the Path of Echoes. "The ancients built this," she said, catching her breath. "If we cross it, their magic will hide us." "Magic?" Mason said with a faint grin. "You mean weird alien science?" "Call it what you like," she replied. "Just don't fall." They stepped carefully across the glowing platforms. Below them, the canyon stretched into endless shadow. Mason looked down once, then quickly stopped looking. Halfway across, the air trembled. A shadow rose from the mist below, a massive hovercraft, black and burning. On its deck stood Kareth himself. His voice thundered through the canyon. "Princess, you cannot protect him. The spear belongs to me." Liora drew her weapon, the blue light blazing in defiance. "It belongs to no one who kills for power." Kareth laughed darkly. "Then you will die for faith, as your father did." He raised his hand. The ship's cannons fired, blasting shards of energy across the canyon. Mason grabbed Liora and leapt behind a floating boulder as explosions rocked the air. "Nice friends you've got," Mason said between breaths. "Keep moving," she shouted. They ran, jumping from one glowing stone to another as blasts chased them. Mason stumbled once, nearly falling into the abyss. Liora caught his arm just in time. The two hung suspended above the void, faces inches apart. "Don't let go," she yelled. "I wasn't planning to," he gritted out. They pulled themselves up just as another blast shattered the bridge behind them. Kareth roared in fury. "Run, little princess," he shouted. "You cannot hide forever. The spear will be mine." Mason and Liora disappeared into the haze, vanishing beyond the canyon's rim. Hours later, they reached the safety of a narrow cave hidden in the cliffs. Liora collapsed to her knees, shaking with exhaustion. Mason looked out at the horizon where Kareth's ship still burned in the sky. "He's not going to stop," Mason said quietly. "No," Liora whispered. "He wants to rule the world. And if he gets the spear, he will." Mason turned to her, his eyes hard. "Then we find it first. Whatever it takes." Liora looked at him, realizing that for the first time in her life she wasn't facing destiny alone. She nodded slowly. "Then we begin the final journey to the cradle of stars." The two walked deeper into the darkness, unaware that the spear's distant light had begun to pulse again. Faster, stronger, calling to the one who had moved it, the human. The night sky over Virell burned with streaks of light. The twin moons hid behind thick clouds and thunder rolled across the barren plains. Deep in a mountain cavern, Mason Hale sat beside a dying fire, staring at his scarred hands. The same hands that had moved the spear. The same hands that now trembled. Across from him, Princess Liora sat in silence. The air was cold, the walls humming faintly with energy. The mountain itself seemed alive, whispering, breathing. They had reached the edge of the cradle of stars, the place where the spear was first forged. Liora broke the silence. "The cradle is beyond this mountain. It's said to hold the heart of our world. If the spear truly chose you, it will answer again there." Mason looked up at her, eyes tired but determined. "And if it doesn't?" "Then," she said softly, "Kareth will win, and the world will burn." Outside, lightning flashed. The storm was moving closer. Mason stood, rolling his shoulders. "Then we better not keep destiny waiting." The path to the cradle wound through tunnels of glass and stone. Strange light pulsed in the walls like veins of fire. Each step echoed, as if the mountain itself was listening. At one point, the tunnel widened into a vast chamber. In the center stood a floating platform of pure crystal, and above it a blinding beam of blue light that pierced the roof and reached into the stars. Liora's breath caught. "The heart of Virell?" Mason stepped closer, feeling warmth from the glow. His heartbeat quickened. The same hum that had filled the temple now vibrated through his bones. The Spear of Unity was calling him again. Without realizing it, he took another step forward. "Mason," Liora warned. "Be careful. The energy here, it tests those who enter." "I'm not planning to touch anything," he said, though his body said otherwise. His feet moved on their own. Each step made the beam brighter, then the voice came. Not from around him, from within. A voice like thunder and wind, deep and ancient. "The world bleeds. The tribes war. Only one not born of these stars can awaken the bond. Step forward, outsider. Prove your heart," Mason froze. "Did you hear that?" Liora shook her head slowly. "I heard nothing," the beam pulsed. Mason stepped onto the platform. Instantly, the air thickened with light. His vision blurred. He saw flashes. Liora as a child, the wars that tore Virell apart, the temple burning. He felt her people's pain, their fear, their hopelessness. He gasped, falling to one knee. "Mason!" Liora ran toward him, but a wave of energy threw her back. The voice thundered again. "You carry no blood of Virell. Why fight for those who are not your own?" Mason's breath came ragged. "Because they deserve a chance." The beam flared, brighter than before. "Would you die for them?" He looked toward Liora, who struggled to rise against the wind. Her eyes met his, full of fear, but also faith. "Yes," he whispered. "I would." The light exploded. Mason's body lifted from the ground, surrounded by ribbons of energy. His veins glowed blue. The mountain trembled. The spear's shape began to appear inside the light, forming slowly, metal and crystal weaving together in the air. Liora shielded her eyes, shouting over the roar. "Mason, stop. It's killing you." He smiled faintly through the pain. "Maybe. It's supposed to." The energy surged. His screams echoed through the cavern as the spear solidified, the same weapon that had once been buried in the temple stone. And then, silence. The light faded. The air went still. Mason fell to the ground, the Spear of Unity clutched in his burned hands. Its glow dimmed, settling into a calm, steady pulse, like a heartbeat. Liora rushed to his side. "Mason, can you hear me?" He opened his eyes slowly. They glowed faintly with blue light. "Yeah," he breathed, weak but alive. "Guess it worked." She looked at the spear, then at him, disbelief in her voice. "You pulled it free. After 1,000 years. It's free." Before she could say more, a deep rumble echoed through the mountain. The ground shook violently. Cracks split the walls. Mason struggled to his feet. "We need to move, now." They ran as the cave began to collapse. Stone fell like thunder. Lightning flashed across the sky outside, and the world itself seemed to tremble with new life. When they finally emerged into the open air, the storm had vanished. The sky above the mountains was alive with light, the two moons shining brighter than ever before. Liora turned to him, eyes wide. "The prophecy, it's complete." Mason looked at the spear glowing in his hands. He felt its power humming and alive, endless, and yet peaceful. "No," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." Far on the horizon, Kareth's black ship rose from the sands, engines burning like fire. The warlord had seen the light. He was coming. The final battle was no longer prophecy. It was fate. The dawn over Virell came with fire and thunder. From the mountains to the desert plains, the world trembled under the weight of destiny. Storm clouds twisted like living shadows as the sound of engines filled the air. Warlord Kareth's army had arrived. Thousands of machines, soldiers, and ships darkening the horizon. And at the heart of it all, standing on the cracked plateau of the Cradle of Stars, was a single human, Mason Hale, holding the glowing spear of unity. Beside him stood Princess Liora, her cloak torn, her face streaked with dust but her eyes burning with hope. "The world's watching," Mason said quietly. "One way or another, this ends today." Liora nodded. "The tribes will come. They've seen the light from the mountain. They'll know the prophecy has come true." But even as she spoke, the sky split with a scream of metal. Kareth's flagship descended through the clouds, landing with a shockwave that shattered the ground. From its ramp emerged the warlord, tall, monstrous, his armor glowing red like molten stone. He looked at Mason with cold fury. "So the alien weapon chose you, human? A thief? A stranger?" Mason gripped the spear tighter. "I didn't choose it. It chose me." Kareth's lips twisted into a grin. "Then it will die with you." The battlefield erupted. Soldiers poured from the ships like shadows. Energy blasts lit the air in flashes of blue and red. Mason ran forward, the spear blazing in his hands. Every swing sent arcs of light slicing through the dust. He moved like lightning, every motion guided by something greater than himself. The spear responded to his thoughts, a living force of unity, defense, and power. Liora fought beside him, her movements swift and fierce. Together they stood like fire and storm against the darkness. But Kareth was not a man easily broken. He marched through his own soldiers, his massive blade humming with black energy. "Mason Hale," he roared, "let us see what your prophecy is worth." They clashed at the center of the battlefield. The shockwave from their strikes split the air. Sparks and lightning danced around them. Kareth struck again and again, his strength monstrous. Mason blocked the blows, but each one drove him back. His arms shook, his chest burned. "You fight for ghosts," Kareth spat. "These people will never unite. They are weak." Mason's eyes blazed. "They just needed someone to believe they could." With a roar, he drove the spear into the ground. A blinding wave of blue light burst outward, spreading across the battlefield. The shock threw soldiers and machines alike to their knees. Liora stared in awe. "He's channeling it." The spear's glow reached the sky, a column of light seen from every corner of Virell. Across the deserts, forests, and shattered cities, the tribes lifted their heads. For the first time in generations, they saw the light of the spear, and one by one they began to move toward it. Kareth roared, striking again. "No light will save you." He swung his blade, but Mason caught it mid-strike with the spear. The weapons locked, energy screaming between them. Mason's voice was steady, calm, almost human and divine at once. "You don't understand, Kareth. The spear doesn't want power. It wants peace." With one last surge of strength, Mason twisted the spear, shattering the warlord's blade. The explosion threw Kareth backward. His armor cracked, his mask split open, and for the first time fear flickered in his eyes. "No," he whispered. "I was meant to rule. You were meant to destroy," Mason said. And I'm done watching worlds burn. He raised the spear high. Light burst from its tip, engulfing the warlord in pure energy. Kareth vanished in a storm of brilliance, and then there was silence. When the light faded, the battlefield was still. Smoke drifted through the dawn air. Mason stood at the center, the spear glowing faintly now. No longer a weapon, but a symbol. Liora approached slowly, her eyes wide with awe and sorrow. You did it. The war's over. Mason looked at her, smiling faintly. We did it. From the hills around them, the tribes began to arrive. Warriors, priests, children. They came not as enemies, but as one people. They knelt before the human and their princess. Liora raised her voice strong and clear. This man came from beyond the stars. He fought not for glory, but for us. Let this day mark the end of our hatred and the birth of our unity. The crowd bowed their heads. Mason looked at the spear one last time. It pulsed gently, warm against his hand, alive. Then he drove it into the earth. The ground shone where it touched. Green light spread like roots, turning the barren soil into life. Flowers grew. The air smelled of rain. Leora's eyes filled with tears. You've healed our world. Mason smiled, looking toward the horizon. Maybe it just needed a reason. The wind rose, carrying the scent of new beginnings. Above them, the twin suns broke through the clouds, shining down on the united world of Virell, a world reborn by the courage of one human who refused to give up. The prophecy was fulfilled. Humanity had not conquered, it had healed.